Good morning everybody. Welcome to WildEarth and welcome to the Greater Kruger National Park, where you find me standing in the fallen giant of a marula tree. We're on a marula crest here, and just off the crest you'll find the Combretum woodlands, down into the steep lines of Terminalia, and then into the drainage lines of rich, nutrient-rich sodic soil. You can see all around me the skeletons of the winter marula trees. This one has fallen over, unfortunately, and looks like it's slowly being devoured by termites as we speak. My name is James. On camera today we've got Brian. On the other vehicle is Scott and Vium. And in the final control, the sultry tones of Tara Dales and her companion Nikki Austin. Nice to have two ladies back in control. Multitasking that they have to do, it's important to have two ladies doing that. Our plan this morning is to head off to the east and south to see where the Pride of Styx breakaway perhaps crossed out of the property, or perhaps to see whether they're still on the reserve. There are two of them and three little cubs that we had the great privilege of spending a good deal of time with yesterday. Scott is going off to the north to check around to the western boundary, just to follow up on the Nkuhuma Pride and maybe see if there weren't some more leopard tracks of Shadow and her cub. We haven't seen them for a while. If you are new to us and you have stumbled upon this website on this marvelous Friday morning, welcome. We're very happy to have you along. Don't tune out just yet. Put your kettle on, settle in, and have a good time with us. You're about to go on a live dawn game drive. We love to hear from you. We want your questions, your comments, and anything you have to say to us. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at wildearth.tv. Just please note that while it's great for us that there are more viewers watching every day, it does become a little frustrating for some of our regular viewers because not all of their questions always get answered. So please do be patient with us. We get through as many as we can, and we try, and we really do appreciate them. So if your questions don't get answered immediately, please send them through again. We love to hear from you. Thank you. I'm now going to try and climb down this marula tree without injuring myself. If I do injure myself, we'll hopefully crash cut to Scott, and then Brian will tape me back together before we continue. Well, I'd say that was pretty elegantly done, wouldn't you, Brian?
Very elegant.
Thank you. Right. It's a very odd sort of weather this morning. There's a strange breeze. It came up yesterday while we were sitting in a beautiful drainage line with the Styx Pride and their little cubs. And it was it was a hot afternoon. And then this sort of ethereal wind blew through the drainage line, and it's remained through the night, and I thought it was going to bring in a cold front, but it's not cold, but there's a strange sort of cool atmosphere about the place. It's probably about 15 or 16 degrees Celsius, which puts us, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 62, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Brian is nodding. Well, that's a good sign. Right, on we go. Put my blankie over my legs. As you would have seen, my legs on that tree there, they're not blessed with a great covering of anything other than hair. So I do need to cover them with a blankie every so often. So lovely update from Tammy and Chris, our zoomies. There was apparently a lioness who came to drink at about 4:20 yesterday morning at the Gari Dam, where we have a permanent camera, in case you didn't know. And then there was also a hyena calling. So, and apparently the lioness went off towards the area where we're planning to go. So that's good news, I suppose. And perhaps to our new viewers, our zoomies are selfless folks who, around the world, who spend their time monitoring our dam cameras. And we've got a couple of fixed cameras on the dams, and they're running 24 hours a day, and they're movable. They're not just static cameras, and these zoomies are people around the world who take shifts to move the cameras and pan them and see what comes down to drink, which is really a great contribution that they make to our sort of business and our enjoyment of the wild, and also to conservation. We're hoping to attract as many people onto this platform as we can, and in so doing sort of further the cause of wildlife conservation in Africa and the world. I think WildEarth has got a couple of cameras in various spots around the world. It's not only in Africa. So check out the website, wildearth.tv. So we're heading down straight towards that waterhole where Tammy and Chris saw the lion and heard the hyena, and we'll use that as our sort of launch pad to the morning. Lovely fresh smell about the air. Like I say, that rather strange breeze blowing. I've just had a report that the weather is not quite what I said it was. I said 16 degrees, apparently it's 14 degrees. And that's probably what it is mid-slope. Up where we were, it gets a bit warmer, and now down where we were a bit lower down, can be a bit cooler here. And that's 57 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. So we've been past the water now. We're going to continue down sort of west of the drainage line that feeds that waterhole, or is fed by that waterhole, and just see that nothing's crossed this way. Those lions and their cubs provoked a great deal of excellent questions yesterday. They also provoked quite a lot of debate as to the fate of the little cubs and the lion dynamics of the area. And I think what we'll do, Scott and I will do, just confirm a few of our suspicions and check a few things with the other lodges around the area, especially a bit further afield, and just make sure that we get an exact handle on who's who and what's going on, because there is a great state of flux, and we'll have a little feature on it at the Fireside Chat come Sunday. Because you see, there is definitely some confusion from us, certainly differing views from our viewers who are extremely in tune with what's going on out here, and then conflicting reports from the different reserves where it's not so easy to get access to what's going on. So we'll do a big thing on the lion prides hopefully on Sunday. All is quiet this morning. Right, so while we drive down this road and try not to run over this crested Franklin, we're going to go across to Scott, and he's going to tell you his plans, and we'll see you a bit later, hopefully with something interesting to report.
Hello everyone, and welcome on board with myself. My name's Scott, and on camera with me today is VM, and we have headed out to the western parts of Djuma in the hope of finding anything really, but specifically Shadow and her cub Sindile. So this has been an area where they've been hanging around. It's a greater area, it's not a small area, but by driving through this area we've got a chance of possibly finding them, or even tracks of them, or who knows what other animals could be lurking about here. So that's our initial plan this morning. We also plan on heading towards the hyena den site. So we're looking forward to the morning, and it's great to have you on board with us. So without further ado, we shall continue. I believe James has started the morning by using some vantage points which will aid him in seeing further and trying to help find us animals to look at. And you've got to make use of the infrastructure out here, the fallen trees and termite mounds, in order to do that. So I'm glad he's using the facilities available to him. I'm sure he has mentioned it's quite a crisp and cool morning. There's a bit of a breeze blowing, and it should obviously start heating up a little bit once the sun pops over the horizon. It's interesting to see how much later the sun is rising since I left 2 weeks ago. And all these little changes are really interesting to be a part of. Being out here every day and you with us, we get to really get in touch with nature and the cycles and the time of year and what exactly is going on. And we also get in touch with what the animals have been up to, even if we're not necessarily seeing them. And there's an example of that just up in the road ahead of us, where an elephant fed on the bark of a buffalo thorn tree. Now, what the elephant would have done is it would have bitten onto this bark and slowly turned it around in its mouth and stripped all the bark off of it. And it's done it in a few occasions. Also here you can see the bark has been removed. As well as here. So clearly the buffalo thorn, or the bark of the buffalo thorn, is a delicacy at this time of the year, and we often have to clean up after the elephants, which is something I don't mind doing. Thankfully we don't have to remove their droppings, otherwise that would be a full-time job, but occasionally we need to remove the branches of trees that they deposit in the road. We've got a very interesting question through from William. And good morning, William. Welcome on board with us. William said that when he started watching the WildEarth safaris, he was told that it was difficult or impractical to actually try and track animals. And that's certainly the case, William, because we don't have a tracker on our vehicle and we don't want to leave you stranded in the vehicle while we wander off looking for tracks or tracking an animal. It does make tracking animals difficult, but not impossible. We can still look for their tracks and get an idea of which direction they're heading in, and circle blocks, and maybe spend very short periods of time off the vehicle investigating where the tracks could lead to. But to be able to track properly, you need time and no distractions. So in our scenario, it's made difficult, but in all the other vehicles that traverse here with their guests, they've all got a tracker. He sits up on the hood of the vehicle and searches for tracks. Once he finds tracks and he determines whether they're fresh enough to follow, then he will take a radio and possibly a rifle and head off into the bush on the trail of the animal. We sadly don't have that privilege, but we certainly can and should check for tracks when we're driving along the road, because it can give us very useful information when it comes to trying to find animals. Thankfully, not all animals require tracking, and sometimes you just bump into them on the road. And just like behind us over here, we have stumbled upon a herd of cold impala. Now, the reason why I say they are cold is their fur doesn't look very chic, and they've got it standing on end to create a thick layer to insulate their body and keep warm, so they appear almost fluffy. And as the morning progresses, they will begin to flatten their fur, and they will look a lot more streamlined, and there'll also be more of a sheen to their coats. But right now they are still warming up. You can see a big male in shot now. He's simply boosting his ego by being amongst all these ladies. It's not actually serving him or the ladies any purpose, because the rutting season has come and gone in the month of May, and it's during that intensive rutting period over basically 1 month that all the impala will do their mating, and that is why I say he's purely here to boost his ego, as he's missed the boat. You saw him let off a little grunt there. That's typical behavior coming out of the rutting season, and they'll perform that funny burping gurgle a lot more during the ruts, and you can see he's still interested in hoping to try and find a lady to mate with, but it's highly unlikely that any of the females will be receptive to him. And what a beautiful morning it is here. The sun, I can see, is just beginning to glow behind us, so in the next 5 minutes or so it should pop up and bathe the wilderness with a beautiful golden light. And hopefully we'll be able to find some other animals to enjoy looking at when that golden light does pierce through. Good morning, Lucy, and welcome on board with us. Lucy would like to know if the animals in this area will migrate, or will there be seasonal movements of animals. And yes, most certainly, Lucy. A little Franklin just ran across the road there. There are a lot of animals that will move, especially the herbivores, in search of food. And as the seasons change, food will vary in certain areas. So we typically find the greatest movement of animals is amongst the herbivores, not so much the predators. And the elephants, which Lucy's interested in because she's noticed that we haven't seen very many, are one animal that are not bound by territory. So they will move throughout the year in search of food and can move hundreds and hundreds of miles in order to find the food that they're looking for. So it's no surprise that there aren't elephants at the moment, but in the coming weeks they could come in for a while and then move off, and I'm hoping that's the case. They're such wonderful animals to view, and it would also be interesting to know where exactly they've moved off to. But the beauty of the ecosystem that we are a part of, being the Greater Kruger National Park, it is massive. It's hundreds of miles long, and that allows animals to move freely in search of food. We've also noticed changes in wildebeest and zebra numbers compared to the summer months, November, December, January, relative to now. But those are natural cycles, so nothing to be concerned about. And I guess you could call them mini migrations, but not massive migrations that occur in Africa like the wildebeest and zebra migration that occurs in Tanzania and Kenya from the Serengeti into the Masai Mara. And there's also another large wildebeest migration in Zambia, which is less well documented, but it also occurs. We don't have those hundreds of thousands of animals moving together simultaneously in one direction in South Africa, but there are certainly seasonal movements with the smaller herds that move from place to place. Just gonna check carefully here for any signs of tracks. I've noticed some old male lion tracks. They're probably a couple of days old. I can see there's a lot of other tracks that have been moving on top of them. But other than that, nothing very fresh. The beauty of this time of the year with tracking is that the roads are so dry and dusty that it allows us to really see the tracks very easily. But for me it can be a little bit confusing because I have been away. The tracks do hold themselves very well in this dry and dusty conditions that we found ourselves in. And VM's just taking you on a little bit of a tour. As you can see, the sun is doing its best to pop up, and what a beautiful morning it is here. There's a very thin layer of cloud cover which is moving at a very, very fast rate from right to left, as you can see. And I'm not sure what it's been like over the last few weeks, but typically we don't have very cloudy skies in our winter. So for me this is a blessing that we have got some beautiful clouds to enjoy as part of the scenery this morning. I wonder how much longer they're going to be hanging around for. That looks like a very thin layer that could well burn out and dissipate as the morning progresses. I haven't heard much chatter on the game drive radio this morning, so maybe all of the guests have decided to sleep in and enjoy a morning off from safari, who knows? Or maybe they're just getting off to a bit of a later start. But at the moment it's just James and myself searching Djuma for anything of interest. There's a chance I may head across to Arathusa a bit later, but for now we're going to continue on towards the hyena den sites and check in on what's been happening there. The cubs are getting quite large now, the 3 cubs that we've watched go up, and therefore it's making it a little bit more hit or miss whether the den site is active or not, because the cubs are beginning to move with the adults. But it's certainly worth a try, and we could bump into anything along the way. Some hyena tracks coming down the road towards us, but hyena is one animal that you would be very brave to try and track down, because they cover such huge distances every night that tracking them would be near impossible. So we are not going to try and attempt that. But we've just got a question through from Matt in Texas. Good morning, and I'm glad to have you on board with us. Matt's interested to know whether the impala are impeded in any way when they fluff up their coats to keep warm, and if a predator was to attack them, would it in any way slow them down or cause them a disadvantage in escaping? And no, I think it's an instantaneous reflex that they can almost just flatten those furs. So I don't think it's going to slow them down or have an impact on them escaping in any way. It's just going to keep them nice and warm, so that at least if they do have to run away from a predator, they aren't frozen when the time comes. even though the sun is just up over the horizon, it's already casting a warm ray of light towards us. And now I would like to try and find you something to look at with this beautiful morning light.
Take it.
Liam's just spotted a duiker, and it looks like we're going to get lucky thanks to his very speedy camera work. And this isn't a sight that we get to share with you very often. Interesting that its one horn is so much shorter than the other. And it looks like it may have possibly broken off in a fight. They're such shy antelope, these little duiker, that we often only see them darting off into the bush, and that is what their name means in Afrikaans, one of our South African languages. It means diver, because most times when you see them, they're diving off through the thick vegetation. And it too, just like the impala, seems to have its coat ruffled up, creating that warm layer of insulation. Well spotted, VM, and good work on the quick camera work. VM knew immediately that he needed to move quickly because he did run a risk of that duiker disappearing before we could show it to you. And it's always a little bit of a gamble when we're driving along as to which animals we should try and show you and shouldn't, because a lot of the time it will end up in a situation where we stop the car, get all excited, and the animal disappears before we can show it to you. But thankfully, unlike the impala and the duiker, VM is warm. Before we can show it to you. But thankfully, unlike the impala and the duiker, VM is warm. He doesn't have his fur puffed out, and he is maneuvering nice and quickly. Well, we're going to continue towards the hyena den site. We should be there in about 5 or 10 minutes, so we'll be sure to let you know what happens. But in the meantime, let's cut across to James and see how his morning's been panning out. We'll see you later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. You find us here on the eastern boundary, and the good news is that, well, first of all, that we have some waterbuck to show you. A lovely herd of bachelors. They were just sparring with each other, and now they've decided they're a bit hungry after their morning exercise, and so they're going to have some breakfast. We have come to the east, and the good news is that we haven't found any tracks crossing out of the reserve. I was afraid that both the sticks maybe would have crossed south and the Nkuhuma Pride would have crossed east. So far, nothing that way. Also, we're in around about where Karula was seen yesterday. Now, for those of you who don't know, Karula is the sort of star of the Djuma show. She's a beautiful 11-year-old leopard who I have yet to meet. Ellen, if you are watching, you became slightly offended, I feel, that I called her aging, so I won't do that again. 11-year-old, sort of, let's just say, almost over the prime of her life, but she's the star and she has an enormous territory in this area, and I've yet to see her, so I was really excited to come across here and see if her tracks haven't crossed back onto Djuma. So you're currently looking due east into a reserve called Torchwood, and you can see there are no fences obviously between us and them, and Karula was just around here on a duiker kill yesterday, but we obviously can't go into Torchwood, and so we didn't see her. So I was hoping she might pop out for our first introduction, but she seems to be avoiding me, saucy minx that she is. Right, we're going to carry on up this eastern boundary. If there aren't any tracks fairly soon, we're going to turn to the west, and which is quite exciting. I'm hoping actually that we won't find tracks on this road, because it will mean that they've crossed out if we do find them. So, here we go. We are now exactly due east of where the Nkuhuma Pride was seen yesterday, and they will move around quite a lot during the night, but it's just going to be so interesting to see what happens with the dynamics going forward. The two prides were, the 6 females yesterday were marking all the way along the sort of direct border of the two prides, and so it'll be interesting to see if there isn't some form of conflict at some stage. Hello Maggie in Vancouver, I hope you're having a marvelous summer's evening, I suppose it must be where you are. Yesterday, in fact. I hope you're having a good Thursday evening. You want to know what is the survival rate of the cubs that we saw yesterday. Maggie, not great. I'd say 1 in 10 males probably makes it to adulthood, to dominate a pride. Lots more will get to sort of 3 or 4 years old, but after that they're in trouble because they have to then try and take a territory. So Maggie, 1 in 10 males probably to full dominance. Females have a better chance because they will remain with in their natal pride, or the pride in which they were born. And so I'd say the female cubs have probably about a 50% chance of surviving to adulthood. That's not great, but it's better than leopards. Leopards in this area, we've got extensive data on the leopards in this area, and it's only 1 in 30, at least 35%. So roughly 1 in, what is that, Brian? I can't work it out. Roughly 3 in 10 will make it to adulthood. Still nothing, which is encouraging. Hello, Djuma in Oklahoma. You want to know if I'm not afraid of a surprise attack when I get out of the vehicle to go tracking. Julian, when I started in the bush, I was absolutely terrified. I was convinced that behind every bush lurked an animal with enormous teeth and claws waiting to devour me at a moment's notice. But as I've become more used to the bush, and a lot of my training was on foot, you start to realize that it's highly unlikely. You also start to realize that you have to be vigilant and aware. And as long as I'm aware of what's going on, so we check what's happening. Yes, there are times when your guard goes down and you could get yourself into trouble. Then, you know, as long as you're aware, things are pretty okay. It's also very important to remember out here that you are seen as the apex predator. So it's a very rare occurrence that an animal out here will attack you. There are very sort of clear, often very clear reasons for why people who've been killed by big cats, often why they've been killed by them. So often the lion is old, or the leopard's old and sick. Often they've had human interaction before, in either in a sort of zoo or animal park environment, or they've been captured from a wild area like this and reintroduced to a smaller reserve. So they just lose that natural fear of human beings that they have. But in an area like this, nothing's impossible, but it's just unlikely. The sun has just peeped up over the horizon. Something ahead there on the road. Might just be a termite mound. Tracks of some hyena on the road. Is that a zebra there, Brian? Looks like it. Zebra up ahead. We're going to go and have a quick look at them, then we're going to come back down this road here, which is where the Nkuhuma Pride was left last night, and see if they haven't murdered something during the course of the night. And you'll find those zebras, especially in the morning like this, will come out into, you can see the area around us is relatively clear. It's been cleared as a fire break. There's a big kudu there, going to the bush. It's been cleared as a fire break, but animals really like it because they can see. And so that's why often that big clearing that I did the opening on, that you first saw me on, is a very popular one for animals because they can see what's going on around the place. A lot of the defense that the animals have out here is visual. And people often ask about the smell of predators. And we did an interesting experiment the other day where I stuck my nose into the den of a hyena. Obviously there weren't any hyenas with it, or I wouldn't have a nose anymore. But we stuck my nose right in there. There's no smell at all. And I think that the predators have evolved to have an almost negligible smell, certainly to the prey animals. Right, we're slowly coming up to these zebras. They're not the bravest around vehicles. And interesting question we've just had. Just while we look at these zebras, a question from the final control: why do leopards have a smell? Well, leopards probably don't actually have a smell. They do smell when they mark territory, though. So their dung and their urine will smell, and there's often people talk about the buttered popcorn smell of leopard urine. That will smell quite strongly and will stay smelling. But the leopards don't. I couldn't tell you what a leopard actually smells like, nor could I tell you what a lion or a hyena smells like, except when the hyena's been marking. I'm not suggesting that maybe animals with more sensitive noses wouldn't pick them up, but to me, they don't have a smell at all. Unlike, for example, a waterbuck, which smells very strongly of musk. These zebra smell a little bit like horses. The giraffe definitely have a distinctive smell. Buffalo have a distinctive smell. So this is beautiful, this is very unusual zebra sighting. Wonderful, there are a whole lot of them coming through. Wild dogs, however, smell pungently. So the canids tend to be smellier than the felids, which is the same in your domestic animals, of course. That's the stallion behind there. He's just made sure that everyone's gone past. I'll just quickly do a turnaround. And the stallion is an important, zebras are the only ones with a sort of herd structure, social structure like they have out here, of the herbivores, with the stallion and his 3 or 4 wives and their offspring, and he will defend them. So we had a little Father's Day feature the other day where we were trying to think of good fathers out here. We came up with frogs and jacanas, various other birds. We struggled to think of a mammal, and perhaps this is a good example of a good mammal father. Where the stallion will, if they're going through thick bush, he will lead them. Otherwise, he'll walk behind and make sure nothing comes from behind. And Brian, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's that rather lovely crested barbet that has landed on the termite mound when the zebra disappear.
Where about? Oh, there.
Beautiful bird, this scruffy bird, but lovely yellow, black, white and red colors. Now he's just hoping for a quick breakfast of termites. And you can just see, just there to the left of your picture, you can see the dung from various other birds that have been doing exactly as he has. Now, it looks to me like the termites may have closed the mound. No, he's found something to eat. So the termites will leave a little chimney open often just to remove some of the heat from inside. They maintain an amazingly consistent 37 degrees inside those mounds. And they have to keep some of the chimneys open to let some of the metabolic heat out. But less so in winter than they do in summer. But often these birds will come, first of all, the first thing they'll do is try and get a quick meal at the open chimneys. But the second thing that they do is they sit there after a cold night and they just enjoy the warm breeze coming up from underneath the ground. It's a really, it's a tremendously pleasant thing to do, to sit on a termite mound and warm your hands over one of the chimneys. I don't think this bird's being particularly lucky though. Isn't he gorgeous? He's normally a fruit eater, but obviously in summer, fruit eaters out here, if they're not flying to Europe, are not going to have such a good time. So they have to diversify their diets. And so he's going to try and find some termites. Termites are full of fat. They're brilliant for energy. Beautiful. Lovely. Okay. So we're going to carry on. I'm going to take the next sort of road to the west, and then we'll sort of head back south down again and see if we can't pick up some tracks. Hello, Ray in Las Vegas. Ray, this question will perplex people until our end finally comes with the Andromeda Galaxy meeting our own Milky Way. Are zebras white with black stripes or black with white stripes? In my opinion, Ray, zebras are neither. Their skin is a sort of typical herbivore grey. It's a greyish colour, out of which sprouts black hair and white hair. So if you were to take the skin off, say, an impala and then pull all the hair out of it, it would be pretty much the same colour, I think, as a zebra skin without the hair on it. So if you're ever in a sort of what shall we say, we'll just stop here and look at that hornbill. If you're ever in a hackneyed kind of, there's a bit of a bird party going on here. Sorry, Brian, it's a phone. There are a couple of birds around here, hornbills and drongos, southern black tits. So, Ray, if you're ever in a sort of a curio shop, which is basically a hackneyed gift store, and they happen to be selling zebra skins, which unfortunately they do quite a lot, go and you can actually go and see it. You can go and sort of move the hair away, and you'll see that the skin is a kind of brownish grey, out of which sprouts white hair and black hair. So zebras are neither white nor black, and now may the debate cease. I don't suspect it will, but that's basically what happens. The hair on the back of an animal does not represent the color of its skin. I hope that helps you out, Ray. Ray, you're in Las Vegas, I believe, which is a very different sort of environment to that in which we find ourselves here. Lovely to have you along. perhaps you'll come out and visit us here one day and see the magnificent zebras yourself. Hello, Elizabeth in Minneapolis. You would like to know, and it's another good question and another quite common question. Would a mother animal, like for example, the lions we saw yesterday with their little cubs, would they be likely to cause damage or more likely to attack us than an animal without babies? Elizabeth, I don't like to use the word attack. Would they become more defensive? Absolutely, they may well become more defensive, and so they would become more easily threatened. And if you didn't understand their behavior, the chances of them charging you and becoming dangerous would increase. So absolutely, like you say, a bit like bears, we had the example yesterday of bears in the wild. If bears are with cubs, they're known to be a lot more aggressive to people, and the same goes for the predators out here. The herbivores not so much, because their babies are born what we call precocial. You know, I'm sure you've seen videos of a deer and horses and probably the antelope out here. As soon as they're born, they can stand within sort of 10 minutes. They are faster than human beings within half an hour of being born. So there's no need for their parents to take the risk of an attack. They'll just run off because they know they're faster than we are. So the predators, a bit of a different story. Then another nice question from Patricia, who has had an experience at Londolozi, where I used to work, just down the road here, across the Sand River. And she said her guide told her that one of the most scary experiences she's had was, he had was from a hippo. And yes, hippo can be pretty dangerous if you don't understand them, A, and B, if you get between them and the water by mistake, they can be very nasty. They actually had an incident there where a guide got into trouble with a hippo. Very competent guide, highly trained and very aware, and very odd incident where the hippo came out of the bush at her, middle of the day. It was totally odd behavior, and she's okay, but yes, it can happen, and a hippo will become immensely threatened if you get between it and the water, because the water is its safety. So as long as you understand that, and as long as you can not be, in between them and the water, you'll be fine. The most important thing, we get a lot of questions about the sort of danger factor and the number of animals that might like to attack us, and aren't you scared of walking, and surely you can't be on an open safari vehicle, a cat's going to jump in and bite your head off and that sort of thing. The crucial thing to understand is that no animal out here is dangerous inherently. Yes, they can become dangerous when threatened, but the chances of being knocked out by something here are so much smaller than being run over by a bus or something like that in a town, as to be almost insignificant. So, a great example is how many people are killed by sharks every year. We as a species are terrified of sharks. Only 5 people in the world are killed by sharks every year. But more than 20,000 people in America every year die falling out of their beds. So you can see how our psychology makes the danger of wildlife, I think, a lot worse than it actually is. Another nice question from David in Cherry Hill in New Jersey about the man-eaters that patrol our borders in Mozambique. So I'm just going to stop here while I have a listen. It's a good idea to listen. We're in and around the area where I'm hoping the lions might be. So we're just going to have a listen, see if there are any alarm calls. David, there are prides of lions that patrol. For those of you who don't know, what happens is that our border with Mozambique to the east is quite porous. In fact, it's totally porous. You may as well not even call it a border. There are lots and lots of very poor people who live the other side of the, in Mozambique there. There are lots in South Africa too. But a lot of people come across here seeking work or seeking some kind of relief from the poverty there. And they cross the Kruger Park. Now, and often at night because it's illegal. And there are prides of lions there that have lost their fear of people, because when these people come, you don't want to see a lion at night because that's the lion's time. And then if you run away from a lion, and that's what happens if you're not trained, you might try and run away. If you see a lion, it will chase you. So if you start behaving like prey, that's how they will see you. So there are a few lions along the border that have developed, people say, a taste for human flesh. It's not a taste for human flesh. I don't think we taste better than anything else. I think that we're just so much easier to catch. So once you realize how, basically how weak and feeble we are as physical specimens compared to the animals out here, then a lion's just going to pick you off every time if he can. And so that's why lions who do eat people normally have to be shot. So, David, your question is, will they come across to an area like this and pose a danger to people on foot? It's unlikely because lions generally, they're very territorial, so they don't go too far. If young males were born in a pride there, grew up learning to do that and came across to an area like this, would they pose a danger to human beings? Yeah, they could. It's possible. It's unlikely, though. And we don't know how many people get eaten every year by the lions around there, but we do know how many people take walks in the area, tourist walks. We know about some of the lodges, like where Brent used to work at Singita, and Scott used to work there. We know how, they've seen those lions on foot. And, yeah, it's not a major issue. I don't think there are huge swathes of big, giant prides of man-eaters patrolling the border. There are probably one or two individuals who've learned that we ain't so scary when you chase us down. But other than that, I think it's pretty safe. Yeah, you've always got to be careful. You never take anything for granted. You always walk around here to looking around 360 degrees all the time, mainly because you don't want to surprise an animal. So the key is, nothing out here is inherently going to try and kill you. But if you frighten them and if you threaten them, things change. It becomes a bit different. I'm going to carry on down the road here. Hello, Eve Comms on email. Eve, you are exactly correct. Eve is just making mention of the recent attack and the unfortunate death of a tourist at the Lion Park in Johannesburg. The Lion Park, it must be understood, is not a wild area like this. It's basically sort of a zoo, basically a lion zoo, where the lions are fed by people. They are administered to by veterinary people. They've been raised from babies often, so they have no natural fear of human beings at all. It's a completely unnatural system, and that's why that unfortunate woman who was not obeying the rules, which was particularly silly on her part, that's why she was killed. It's got nothing to do with normal lion behavior at all. Otherwise, we have sat, Brian and I have been, what, Brian, how close have you been to a lion? So close, he's just indicating, yeah, like a foot away from the vehicle. They don't even look at us. So this is round about where the Nkuhuma Pride was seen yesterday evening. There we go, lovely point from Edward. Edward says cows kill between 20 and 30 people a year in the US. So they kill more people than sharks do. Watch out for the next time you go past a dairy herd. Think not on the danger that a buffalo presents. So far I have yet to find a track of any kind of predatory cat, leopard or lion. Sort of strange wintry breeze continues to blow, not very strongly. Fairly lifeless part of the reserve, this at the moment. I suppose the one good news is that they haven't disappeared. I'll just stop here and have another listen, Brian. Why don't you just go across to that bush there? Ahead, and they come and they rub their horns up against trees like this. And a tree like this, which is a guarri bush, Euclea divinorum, there's often quite a lot of tannin in the bark, and that's what gives it the red hue. And Brian and I the other day tasted some bark from an acacia tree, which the elephants like to eat. And they don't eat this bark. Here you go, Brian.
Thank you.
And we're just going to have a taste of this and see if there's an obvious reason. I don't think that's too bad. It's a bit tanniny. In fact, it's very tanniny. so with the acacia bark, it peels off in these lovely sort of chewing gum-like strips, and there isn't that kind of bitter tannin taste that you get out of this. You can almost taste the vitamins in the acacia bark and not in that guarri bark. Nothing eats these guarri trees. They're one of the most common trees we get out here, but they produce lots of chemical and defensive mechanisms. No thorns, very pleasant. You use them for fire beaters. They're very easy to break, but nothing eats them. And any other tree without defense, obvious defense like that, gets absolutely hammered out here. But these ones don't, because they were very strong chemical defenses. I must say it's a very sort of soundless environment. There is the winter morning chorus, which, as I said the other day, is not so much Beethoven's ninth as his clarinet quintet in the winter. In the summertime, it's much more symphonic. But otherwise, there are no sort of alarm calls. There are no tracks. All is at peace. And the medicinal purposes of that guarri bush, there are no sort of medicinal uses that I know of. But there is a traditional use of it. And it's that traditional use that gives the tree its botanical name, which is Euclea divinorum. And all over the world, people try and divine water with forked sticks. It's a little tiny little nyala baby. go. Nyala cow and her little lamb. So Euclea divinorum, the divinorum comes from the divining of water, and if you don't know what that means, oh, she's very confiding. Divining water means to walk with a forked stick along the ground, and apparently there's underground water. If you have the talent, or the sight, as they say, the stick will then point down towards the earth when you walk over a stream of underground water. I know some people who swear by it, and others who write it off as a crock of nonsense. I personally do not know. Beautiful in the light. Hello, Edward. You're worried about my health. Thank you very much for that, Edward. You would like to know if I've ever had any ill health from sampling the local produce. By that, I'm assuming you mean some of the plants out here. Edward, no, I haven't, thankfully. Brian did warn me the other day that he thought I'd get some form of stomach infection, perhaps, from the rolling around in the sand where there was some buffalo dung the other day, but thankfully no ill effects as of yet. There's not a lot of very poisonous stuff out here, Edward. I'm pretty careful about it. There is one very poisonous plant called the tambuti, which I avoid studiously. Beautiful golden light on that Nyala cow and her little baby. It's unusual that they should be on their own like this without some more Nyalas. Not very clever to be alone in an area like this if you're a tasty Nyala baby. That tree that we're on there is a gardenia that come the summertime will make some beautiful, delicious smelling flowers, but they only last 3 or 4 days before they die. But it's really great when you can find them. Righty-ho. Let us press gently on and see what we can find. The morning is having a slightly soporific effect, I must say. It's rather peaceful out here, isn't it, Brian? Which is not ideal if you're looking for big cats, but certainly very pleasant if you're just enjoying it. Right. Lie on track. Okay, we have tracks of at least one lioness now on the road. So we're going to go across to Scott now. Brian and I will follow up on these tracks, and if we come up with anything, we'll be sure to come back to you as soon as possible. So we'll see you just now. Wish us luck.
Welcome back, everyone, and I'm sure you've been having a great time with James. It sounds like you've been seeing some interesting animals along the way, and I've just seen another interesting animal called a slender mongoose. It's scurried down into this vegetation on our right, and I'm hoping it's going to pop out for us to see it, but I fear it may be hiding from us. We're at Treehouse Dam. It's a beautiful waterhole, and interesting to see how much it's dried up in the 2 weeks that I've been away. It's losing considerable amounts of water, and unlike twin dams, which we passed by a little bit earlier, there were a few birds hunting there, a saddle-billed stork and a grey heron and some hummerkorps, but for some reason there's nothing here, so they appear to all be concentrating their hunting efforts at Twin Dams. It's a beautiful, beautiful morning. It's warmed up considerably since I last saw you about half an hour ago, and I'm certainly enjoying the slightly warmer conditions, and I think the animals are as well. Having said that though, we did just pass by a herd of impala and they still had their coats all fluffed up to keep them warm. As VM is showing you now, the only action at this waterhole is underneath the surface of the water, which is no good for us. So we're going to continue and probably head towards Arethusa and see what's happening across there. I've just got a report on the radio that the 2 Styx lioness and their 3 little cubs have been found this morning. All of them are fine and well, and it sounds like they could have actually made a kill last night. Oh, there we go. There's the slender mongoose, warming itself up in the sunshine, giving us a great opportunity to view it. They usually don't hang around, but on this cool morning, it's willing to sacrifice running away to continue basking in the morning sunshine. Now, unlike the dwarf mongooses, which we get here, that live in colonies, the slender mongoose is a solitary mongoose. So the slender mongoose and the white-tailed mongoose are the 2 solitary mongoose that we'll get here, and the banded and the dwarf will live in small families. So no surprise to see it on its own. It's got a distinctively yellow tinge and a little black spot on the end of its tail. And just like all of the other mongooses that we get here, they're ferocious little predators that will attack just about anything they can overpower, and snakes are often on the menu. I've seen some incredible footage of a slender mongoose attacking a black mamba, which is a highly, highly venomous snake that you get in this area. And it wasn't the biggest of black mambas that the slender mongoose was attacking, but it was still probably 1.5 meters to about 2 meters in length, so still a big snake, but not as big as they do get. So even though it appears to be fairly cute and cuddly basking in the sun behind us, they can really get to business when need be. I'm interested to see whether it's going to be worth sticking around with it, and by spending time with it now, we'll be reassuring it that we are only here to spectate and have no plans on interfering with its morning. And by investing time with this animal, it will hopefully become more relaxed with our presence, and that way go about its daily business without any concern of us. It would be very, very interesting to see it going about hunting, and who knows what it could come across and feed on. It seems to be showing a few more signs of life, so I think it might be worth sticking around. It's currently sitting on an old termite mound, and there will be a network of small burrows in and around where it's sitting, and within these burrows may be some tasty morsels that it may feed on. Imagine if it pulled a snake out of one of those holes. That would be a serious bonus. But I think these may be the last few glimpses we have. We are going to continue in the same direction. It's kind of moving parallel to the road, so there's a small chance it could pop out again. But that, like I said earlier, was a really great viewing of a slender mongoose. They don't usually stick around. Just gonna wait here. I can see it. It's not gonna be easy for VM, but it could pop out into another clearing. It's just behind the buffalo thorn there, VM, in a little gap. There we go. It's not easy to see right now, but as it moves its head, you'll be able to notice it again. And I just want to really make the most of this opportunity, because it does seem quite relaxed with us, to see if we can't get a better insight into its daily activities. Unlike the other solitary mongoose, the white-tailed mongoose, which is nocturnal, the slender mongoose is diurnal, so it's a daytime mongoose. But at the moment, it looks like it's just found another place to bask in the sunshine. So I'm not sure how long it will be worth spending here, but we'll give it a minute or two. Also, by being parked, the vehicle is silent, which allows us to listen to the bush around us, and from kilometers around we could hear noises, alarm calls, vocalizations from animals that may help us in finding some interesting action. Okay, well, we are going to carry on and leave this slender mongoose to its own devices. And just to give you an idea, it's probably about 2.5 to 3 times the size of the dwarf mongoose, which we usually see. So the dwarf mongoose's bodies are about 6 inches long, I'd say, and the slender mongoose's body, I'd say, is about 12 inches, so probably double the size. So just to give you an idea, I know it can be difficult for you to get an idea of size, and I hope that gives you a better indication as to how much bigger it is. The white-tailed mongoose is probably 4 or 5 times bigger than that slender mongoose, and the banded mongoose, which is the other mongoose that we see here, but only very occasionally, and I don't think I've ever managed to actually share a sighting of banded mongoose with you, are slightly bigger than the slender mongoose. So 4 very different mongooses, all living in the same area, and they differ in size and social structure, as well as time of activity, 3 of which are diurnal and the 4th is nocturnal. Now, I believe James could have seen the vultures that I've just noticed across to the right of us. Well, I've just got a great report that there are 2 male lions at the Djuma waterhole. So we've thankfully got a live waterhole camera over there that will allow you to take a look right now if you would want to. But now we just need to work out who's closer, James or myself, to go and have a closer look with the vehicle. James for Scott. Okay, well, James is off the vehicle, and therefore it's going to be a little bit tricky for me to work out who's closer to the lion, and therefore we will just take you directly there. But before we do that, these are hooded vultures, and they're quite easy to distinguish from other vultures because they've got a very, very thin beak. They're the smallest of the vultures we get here. And they've also got that distinctive little bald head. And we're off. Well, nothing like a radio call like that. And I am going to now hastily take us on a bit of a roller coaster to get to these male lions and see exactly what they're up to. I'm guessing they must have come from the north, from Buffalo's Hook, because that's the only area that I haven't checked this morning, and I think James also hasn't checked that area. So they snuck in without our knowing, and what a pleasant surprise it is. I'm guessing it's two of them are timber males, but only time will tell, and I'm sure some of you who've gone across to the Djuma waterhole camera have probably already begun to work out and try and identify which lion they could be. Craig, Scott. Just going to try and update Craig, who's another guide searching this area for any animals, but he doesn't seem to be listening to the radio at the moment, but I will keep trying to let him know. And it'll take us about 5 minutes at a comfortable speed to get us to these lion. I do want to kind of rush across there to make sure we get as much action out of them as possible. And who knows what could happen in the next few minutes. There could be some buffalo approaching the waterhole or in the vicinity, and that would be a wonderful showdown to witness. Two big male lions against the buffalo. It could happen, so don't go anywhere. Unless, of course, you're going to the Djuma waterhole camera. That we will accept until we, of course, get there. And thank you very much to whoever sent through those updates that the lion arrived there. It's so important for all of us involved in this to work as a team and share whatever information we can with one another. Sorry, Impala, we are in a rush. Okay, well, I believe it was Valerie who sent through the first update. So thank you very much, Valerie. And it's not only two males, it sounds like the whole Nkuhuma Pride is there. Now that's really interesting because they were last heading east away from the waterhole when we left them last night, and who knows, maybe they made a kill nearby and have now come to quench their thirst. Either way, happy to know they are on the property, and I'm told that they are looking very full bellied, so that makes sense that they did make a kill nearby. They've had a successful evening. And that's great news because they were looking relatively hungry last night. And that windy evening that made for good hunting conditions was capitalized on by the Nkuhuma Pride. It was a very windy evening until about 9 o'clock last night, and I'm guessing that in those first few hours when it was windy they managed to get lucky. Two more minutes and we'll be there. And it's important that we get there quickly, because if the line are full bellied, as soon as they've had something to drink, I'm fairly certain they're gonna find some shade, or probably sunshine still, but not be hugely active for the rest of the day. That just veered off down to the right is where half of us are currently staying here at Djuma, and that'll give you a very good idea of how close the line are to where some of us sleep. The final control room is just up ahead of us, so we're also very close to everyone in final control. And the lion are just in front of us, so get ready to get your screenshots, because there's some beautiful morning light, and I'm sure VM's gonna get you in a great position to fire off some screenshots. And I think it's certainly worth making the most of this before these lion start relaxing, which is what I'm guessing they're going to do next. Awesome, here they are, coming straight towards us. This is going to be magical. Just an opportunity to get us down into a little dip where we'll be shooting from a low angle up towards them, which is going to make for some great shots. Okay, just need to give VM a moment or two to level off the camera. They certainly have had a lot to feed on. I wonder what it could be that they managed to catch. For all of them to be this full-bellied, it must have been something very substantial, possibly even a buffalo. Here come the rest of the pride from the rear. Absolutely awesome. Look at this. You can see all of the mud on their chin from where they've been drinking. What a pleasant surprise. Again, I must say a huge thank you to all of you that sent through the updates that helped to get us here in time to enjoy this beautiful sighting. And without your updates, we wouldn't be here. So a huge thank you to all of you that sent through messages. There's been a flood of updates coming through. Morning, Craig.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing? Morning, everyone.
Morning. No complaints, sir.
Well, this is the young male we can see at the back here, and he's about to pop into the sunshine, so this is going to make for a beautiful view. Well, I wonder where they plan on heading to next. I'm quite surprised actually that they haven't taken a moment to relax here, but that's no surprise. And like you may have just heard Craig saying, they may have remains of this buffalo kill nearby that they're wanting to head straight back to. So we'll do our best to now follow them and try and work out exactly what's going on. If it was a full-grown buffalo that they managed to kill, it would be unlikely that they have finished it off in one sitting. So let's try and see exactly what's happened last night. They are now moving parallel to this road that we're driving along on our left-hand side. I'm not sure which angle they approached the dam from. Okay, I've just seen one lying down over here on our left, so I'm going to try and sneak us into a position where we can see them and establish what they're going to be. Craig's just popped up in front of us, and here we go. This is looking a little bit more typical of sleepy lion behavior. And what we're going to do is you get comfortable and then I'll reposition, Craig. That's perfect. So just give us a moment or two to get into position, because we are in a little bit of a awkward spot here. So we're going to let Craig get himself into a decent spot, and then we'll position ourselves accordingly too. But I don't think there's going to be too much action here. The lions are all already horizontal, and about the most interesting thing you can see is how bloated those bellies are. It's absolutely incredible how much meat they can cram into their stomachs. And I'm certainly not envious of their position that they're in right now.
I think we need to send James for a little walk down in the bottom here.
Exactly. I wonder what they could have fed on, Craig. Because a fully grown buffalo is surely too much for them to finish off in one sitting, yet they're all very full-bellied. It will be a mystery.
Like I say, I think we should send James down into
Do you
the
think they've still got more meat? Possibly.
Yeah, and it's been a few days since I've seen them. They've been in relatively thick blocks. We've had other lions around. So I've left them for a few days, and not a bad way to find them.
No, not at all.
Well, he's lying right at the back.
Now, I'm not too sure. The initial update that we got this morning said that there was 2 big males, so that could have been misinformation, or the 2 big males could have splintered off in another direction. So that is one question that I'm asking myself as we sit here, because that also certainly would have played a big role in whatever they did catch and feed on last night, if there was 2 big males that were also feeding with this pride it would have increased the amounts of meat that they can consume for obvious reasons. Okay, well, I've just got some clarification on what I've just been discussing regarding those two big male lions. Apparently, there was an update from the Zumi Terran sent through about 4 hours ago, and Tammy saw one lioness coming down to drink at around 4:15 a.m. So maybe that was where the confusion came from.
There's 2 males and 6 females have crossed over into Malo Malo.
Okay.
From other little Gari orphans.
Okay. I'm quite surprised to see a little bit more action from these lions, so this is a pleasant surprise. And
Don't go down there.
it really is interesting, their behavior. They were all passed out, and then in just an instant, for no apparent reason, this one lioness has decided to get up and move, and now the rest of the pride are looking on, wondering whether they should follow or not. And I believe a lot of the viewers out there are amazed at how full-bellied these lions are, and it really does go to show that they need to make the most of whatever opportunities they get, and when the going is good they make the most of it, because they can go for days without catching their next prey, especially at this time of the year when they don't have much cover, and a lot of the vegetation that they're stalking through is so dry and crunchy that it makes a very loud noise as they try and sneak up on their prey. But I agree with you, it's absolutely phenomenal how much they can squeeze into their bellies. It looks like Junior, who is the young male at the back, has managed to get more into his stomach than any of the others, and his belly seems to be protruding considerably more than the others, and there's a few reasons for that. He's big and strong and still growing, and he would have been able to outcompete the rest of the pride and get into the easiest parts of the carcass to feed on, and that way get the most of the easy cuts, you could say.
They do look uncomfortable.
Well, we've just got a question through from Jennifer. Good morning and welcome on board with us. Jennifer's interested to know about this young male lion and whether he's been chased away by his fathers, or if there's been any animosity shown towards him, because it is quite strange that a male of his age is still with his family pride. And you're right, Jennifer, it is fairly surprising that he is still tolerated in his home pride, with his natal pride rather, And there have been one or two circumstances that we've been aware of in the last few months where his fathers have shown a little bit of animosity towards him, and they have actually chased him away. But he then just returns back to the Pride once his fathers have moved off. But it certainly will get to a point where they will no longer tolerate him, and those days are soon approaching. I think with any time within the next few months we could all of a sudden stop seeing him, and he's going to move off and try and create a life for himself, which he's going to be up against a long and windy road. Because he is on his own, he doesn't have any brothers that he can move off with. It's going to mean that the odds are kind of stacked quite heavily against him, but only time will tell, and it'll be interesting to see whether he is successful or not. Well, I think it's safe to say that these lion are going to spend the rest of the day here, and we can come back this afternoon and see what they're up to. I'm guessing they will probably head back to the Djuma waterhole for another drink, and then probably continue sleeping. They could spend the next 24 hours in this area, and it wasn't too long ago that they actually did make a kill nearby and then did spend 24 hours relaxing and digesting their ballooned stomachs. Which is a name that I have yet to hear, so I'm guessing you could be a new viewer, so welcome on board with us. And Katydid would like to know why there is no father figure or male lion that is with this pride, as she was under the impression, or he was under the impression. I'm not sure whether you are a boy or a girl, Katydid. Your name is a bit misleading with regards to that. But Katydid is under the impression that lions will have a harem of females, and that is not the case. It's more common for one male lion or a coalition of male lions to actually have a territory which encompasses several prides, and those males will typically move around alone or with the other males, making sure that there's no other threats or other males trying to sneak into their territory. And they'll only join up with the lioness and the prides when there is food or mating opportunities. So more often than not, in this area, in the Sabi Sands, your prides of lion will not have male lions in attendance with them, unless, like I say, there's an easy meal that the males will be cashing in on, or the opportunities to mate. So that's also the case with a lot of the animals. One animal that I can think of that has a harem structure is a zebra. So the zebra male will fight off other males and compete throughout the year for his females, and he'll never leave their side. Whereas lions aren't the case, and most other male animals out here will only spend time with females when it actually suits them, and that is most often when there's a mating opportunity, or possibly when there's an easy meal to cash in on. Thanks for sending your question through though, Katydid, and good to have you with us. Well, as much as I love watching lions, and this specific pride, the Nkuhuma Pride, I don't think they are going to be providing us with too much excitement this morning, so we are going to continue and leave them to digest their meal and go and see what else is running around here at Djuma, because I feel that there could be a lot more excitement elsewhere, and by us being stuck here, we could be missing out on something else that's going on. And I think it'll make sense for us to return here this afternoon, a little bit later on, when we get to see them a little bit more active, and possibly to get to see them drinking. Craig, thank you, sir.
See you later.
Cheers, everyone.
Where are you heading now?
It's a good question, eh? I'm not too sure. Where do you want to go?
I'm going to stop somewhere for a cup of Java.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Okay.
I've got planned.
Okay, cool, Craig. Well, enjoy that. And we will see you later.
Might have an extra cup or two.
That's very kind. Thank you. So Craig kindly invited us to join him for a cup of coffee, and it's very civilized out here on safari. The guides will stop with their guests in the morning and evening drive. In the morning, typically, you'll have a coffee or a tea, but in the evening, gin and tonics and beers are quite popular. Having said that, though, it's not uncommon for guests to enjoy an amarula coffee in the morning, which is a delicious liqueur. There's a pretty bird which has just landed in front of us. You may have seen a flash of blue, and it flew down to try and catch an insect, which I think it did do. I'm just going to reposition. It's flown up into a tree, and already we've got some action as we left those sleepy lions. I'm hoping this lilac-breasted roller is going to let us get nice and close. Ooh, this is going to be good. And it's still busy trying to finish off whatever it's caught there. Or has it got a piece of grass stuck in its mouth? Yeah, it looks like it's got a piece of grass caught in the mix. And I think it swallowed that involuntarily as it gobbled up the insect that it caught. Isn't that a beautiful bird? I'm interested to see what it's going to do with this blade of grass, because there we go. No luck. It appears to have swallowed a portion of it, I think, along with the insect that it ate, and that's why it's not looking too comfortable at the moment. It's like swallowing a long piece of spaghetti and having half in your mouth and the other half dangling out of it. It is not a situation you'd want to find yourself in. Well, it seems to have surprisingly come to terms with this new accessory. Alright, here we go. Come on, Mr. Roller, rid yourself of that blade of grass. It's actually really interesting. You can see a few very small pieces of mud almost on the end of its beak, where it must have pierced into the earth after this insect, probably a grasshopper. Oh. Well, we'll never know the end of that story, but interesting nonetheless. So there's quite a few of you that are interested to know the composition and number of animals in this pride. I believe Safari and Elizabeth have both sent through similar questions. And good morning and welcome on board with us. There's 8 lions in the Nkuhuma Pride, one of which is the young male, who's probably around 3.5 years of age now. Then there's 2 smaller sub-adults, which are probably over a year now, coming on a 1.5 years, I'm guessing. And then the rest are all fully grown lioness. So that would mean 5 adult lioness, but of varying stages of adulthood. 2 of which are noticeably older. And I'm hoping that in the near future some of these lioness come into season and we get a new influx of lion into the Nkuhuma Pride. It could turn out that 4 or 5 of those adult lioness could come into season simultaneously, and if they all have cubs at the same time, they could almost triple the pride's numbers. It is obviously a short-term and not necessarily sustainable influx in numbers, because youngsters so often get killed, and until they're at least a year of age, anything could happen. Here's some more very pretty birds called crested francolin, and they've got the very distinctive white stripe through their eye, which will help you to identify them in the future. The other francolin that we see here do not have that white stripe. And aren't we so lucky to be able to not only look at lions, the big stars of the show, but also some smaller yet equally pretty and interesting animals like these crested francolin. Go ahead for Scott, Craig. Okay, copy, thanks very much. I am interested. Well, thanks, Vim. And we just got an update from Craig that he's seen 2 hyena coming down to the waterhole to drink. So that sounds like an opportunity that we shouldn't pass up. So off we go. I'm not going to waste any time because I want to try and get to actually see them drinking, and then not only that, to try and get an idea of what they're going to do after they've drunk. I wonder which clan they're from. It'll be nice though to try and follow them for as long as possible. It's a little bit bumpier, so hold on. What a morning it's been. I hope you've all been enjoying it as much as we have. And it's so good to have you on board with us. And again, huge thank yous to all of the updates that you sent through earlier to help us to get to see these lions. If we had have been 2 minutes later, we wouldn't have seen any of the action that we got to see as we arrived at the sighting, and all we would have seen were the full-bellied sleepy cats. I'm glad we got into position when we did. Just approaching at the dam now, so we should in the next moment or two have a view of these hyena. Awesome, they're still here. And I'm guessing that they would have been trying to clean up the scraps and remains from whatever it was these lions killed. If there was remains of the kill of a substantial portion, the lions would have returned to the kill. So it makes me confident that the lions finished off as much as they needed to, or much as they could comfortably feed on, and only left a few scraps and bones for these hyena. Even judging by the hyenas' bellies, it doesn't look like they've had lots to feed on. At this time of the year, as the water dries up, the animals can find it difficult to find a good place to drink from, because it can be very muddy on the periphery of the water's edge. And it looks like these hyena are just trying to find a harder patch of ground that leads up to the water's edge that will allow them to drink a bit more easily. There's a few blacksmith lapwings fluttering through the shot that you would have seen. Now an Egyptian goose in the foreground. It could be that they're also simply following the scent of the lion. They've lost it now because they're heading in the wrong direction, but it's not uncommon for hyena to follow the scent of lion and leopard, with the knowledge that when they do eventually catch up with them, there could be some food. And this is great to see how hyena are animals of endurance. They cover huge distances, and it's often in that slow trot that you can see them disappearing off now. And this allows them to not only search for easy meals, but also hunt down prey for themselves. Interesting that they have headed in that direction. I'm guessing that they could be members from a different clan, not the clan where we see denning, which is behind us. And I was hoping that they were going to be members of that same clan, because then they would have possibly taken us back there for a meeting with the family, possibly next time, or possibly they are the members of that clan and they've just moved den sites. Thanks very much for that, Craig. Good morning, Kay in Wisconsin, and welcome on board. Kay is interested to know, will the lioness tolerate dominant feeding behavior from Junior, the young male? And it's not whether they will tolerate it or not. They don't have an option, sadly, Kay, because he is bigger and stronger than them now. He simply outcompetes them, and it'll be the same even for within the lioness and the pride. The biggest and strongest lioness will fight her way into the best feeding position. So even though they can be loving and affectionate when there's no food around, as soon as a kill is made, they will all fight fiercely amongst one another to get into the best spots. Now, that leads to another portion of Kay's question, and that was whether he will actually help in the hunt. And yes, he certainly will, especially in bringing down bigger prey. So when it comes to the larger animals where the pride will need a bit more help, and where he will have time to drag his lazy bones from the back of the pride or the back of the action into whatever's going on, yes, he certainly will help out. But in the scenarios where the pride are hunting smaller prey that can often be brought down quite quickly, I'm sure he's going to be trailing too far behind to even lend a hand, and he'll just come in and steal whatever food, well, not steal, but yeah, essentially help himself to the spoils of the kill that he wasn't really involved in. The clouds are very interesting today. They've been blanketing over and blowing over and coming backwards and forwards, so a combination of clouds and blue sky this morning. It'll be interesting to see how the day turns out, but I'm enjoying a bit of cloud cover. It's not hugely common at this time of year. One of its fellow species. There's always a host of birds which enjoy searching for food here in the quarantine clearings. So we're just going to continue and see if we can get into a good spot where we can enjoy sightings of a few more birds. There have been crowned plovers which have successfully raised a few hatchlings. And I'm just checking to see if this crowned lapwing that we can see, which is the bird on the top left of your screen, doesn't have any chicks running alongside it. I can't see any. And I noticed a few chicks just before I went on leave 2 weeks ago, so I'm hoping there's still a few chicks around. Like most baby animals, the first few weeks of their life are when they are most vulnerable, and often adults will lose young. No chicks evident here, but it could be that they have hidden down in the grass. They're exceptionally well camouflaged, and their number one method of escaping is simply to lie completely flat in the grass. One of my favorite birds is up ahead, so it seems like the birds are going to be entertaining us for the next few moments. Just going to try and get us into a good position. This is not the best, but it'll do for now. There's some helmeted guinea fowl searching for food. They are mostly youngsters. I can tell that because the crest on their head, which is a keratin bulge, they're all very small. So there's there's one adult in and amongst them, which we'll be able to show you, but the one that you've just seen there was a youngster, so it would have hatched in November or December last year. But there is one adult which has got a much bigger keratin crest and also a blue face. So I'm just going to try and reposition ever so slightly. And that way we'll be able to get a better view of them. You'll be able to see the difference between adults and youngsters. That should do. They're really comical little birds, these. And now you can see the comparison between the adults and the youngsters. The adults have got the bright blue head and the large keratin crest or helmet, whereas the youngsters aren't quite there yet. And they'll be feeding on grass, seeds, small insects, and they often use their feet to scratch through the undergrowth and reveal little morsels to feed on. Very similar to a chicken. And look at how incredibly patterned they are with those tiny little white spots on their feathers. They've got really awesome coloration and patternings. Hard to believe that not too long ago we saw a Verreaux's eagle owl, a very large owl which had managed to kill a guinea fowl. And that would have been a very substantial meal for that bird. But sadly for the guinea fowl, they are high up on a lot of the predators' menus, especially the birds of prey. Great. I can't resist this, so we're going to spend a bit more time with them because they are such cool little animals, and they were at one stage looking like they may continue towards us, but now they've all turned away and headed in the opposite direction. Well, good morning to Kiffy in Cape Town. Very happy to hear that you've tuned in. For those of you who are new to the show, Kiffy is Nikki's father, and very happy to have him on board with us this morning. He's interested to know where I have picked up my knowledge of the wilderness, and for example of the harem question that came up earlier regarding the lion and how lion males will compete for females and how they will operate within certain areas and cover not one pride but often several prides at a time. And Kiffy, over the years we have shared secrets and stories amongst guides, but initially it started off here in the Sabi Sands, my training, and over the years a combination of sharing thoughts with other guides and also reading textbooks, you come to work out exactly what your thoughts and opinions are on the various animals and what they do, because you can often find there's no set rule for any given animal, and often dynamics will change from one area in Africa to another, even though the same animal may be, or the same species of animal may be being researched or looked at. But Kiffy, good to have you on board with us, and I hope you're enjoying the safari. Well, the guinea fowl all disappeared, so we shall continue and see what else is happening out here. It seems like the bush is coming to life now that it has cooled down, warmed up a bit. And the birds are certainly out and about and beginning to chatter a little bit more, and the temperature's a lot more pleasant than it was for the first couple of hours. Just got a question through from Lucy in Columbus. Morning, Lucy. And Lucy would like to know if we know who the father of Junior could be. Junior is the young male lion that we saw a little bit earlier with the Nkuhuma Pride. And yes, Lucy, we've got a very good idea as to who the father could be. It will be one of the Matimba males. So probably one of two males in a coalition that we still see around here. And the reason why we can very safely assume that they are the fathers is that they haven't killed him and they have tolerated him. If they weren't his father, they would have killed him when he was much younger, in that way releasing his mother of his responsibility of raising him, of the responsibility of raising him, and that way they would have been able to get their genes into the system. And that's common with both lion and leopard and cheetah. If any male of those three species comes across young cubs that are not their own, they will kill them. And that's how Mother Nature ensures only the strongest and best genes are carried through ecosystems at any given point of time. And that helps us to assume that the Matimba males are his father. Interestingly enough, they'll be the same males who eventually chase him off when the time comes, and as we have discussed, that could happen very soon. Just got some more interesting information through from Chris on Twitter. Thanks very much for sending this through, Chris. And when one lioness from the Nkuhuma Pride was seen at around 4:15 a.m. this morning drinking at the waterhole, she was already full-bellied. So I think we can safely assume that the lion therefore made the kill in the earlier hours of the evening. Who knows, possibly moments after we left them at the end of the broadcast last night. Hard to tell. We couldn't share anything from camp. We had no idea that a kill had been made, otherwise we of course would have headed there first thing in the morning. But thanks very much for sending that info through, Chris, and it's great trying to piece together the puzzle of what may have happened. Even though we'll never know exactly what it may be, we can use pieces of information like what Chris has just given us to try and best understand what happens when we are tucked up in our beds. It really is incredible how much the bush has continued to dry out and thin out in the 2 weeks that I've been gone. We can continue to expect that for the next few months, basically until October or November, which is when we will expect our next decent rain. We may get the odd downpour between now and then, but not enough to contribute to any major growth. And it's going to make life easier for us because we can see further into the bush. So I'm certainly enjoying the change, but the herbivores aren't going to be nearly as happy as we are with the drying conditions, as it basically means there's less food around for them. But it is a natural cycle to have a drought every kind of 5 to 7 years in this area, or drought conditions. And these drought conditions will allow the predators a moment where they can capitalize on weaker prey, and that certainly will help animals, especially like the Styx Pride, for example, with their 2 young cubs. Those cubs have been born at a great time where, in all likelihood, there's going to be a bounty of easy meals as the herbivores weaken due to lack of nutrition. So as those 3 little cubs are bound to get a very good kickstart to their life. Well, thanks very much for joining in with that epic lion sighting that we've just had. And I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering what James is up to and what he has been up to since you've been with me. So let's go over to him and get an update, and we'll catch up with you a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. We find ourselves in the far southwestern sector, eastern sector of the reserve. We have bashed through bush. I've torn Brian's clothing to shreds, all in the vain hopes of finding something dead. And the reason is we've been following that juvenile battalier that you can see on your picture. Now, he was in the company of some rather ominous-looking hooded vultures, which we saw yesterday. Well, I don't know if they were the same ones, but possibly. And battalier often eat carrion. They're often the first to a kill, after the thing that's killed, of course. And then they're followed by the hooded vultures, and then the bigger vultures. But Brian and I have done an extensive search of the area and failed to come up with anything. So we thought we'd just show you this rather magnificent bird. Now, the adult battalier, of course, is not brown at all like that one. He's black, or he and she are both black, with beautiful red sort of face mask, which I shall show you a photograph of just now. But he looks like he's going to fly. Every time the wind comes up, he looks like he might take off. But the most interesting thing, of course, is that the battalier, that one specifically, is probably I'm guessing at about a 3-year-old. They live to 40, but they take 7 years to reach their adult plumage. Now, during those 7 years, each molt, their tail gets progressively shorter and shorter, because when they're adults, at 7 years, they fly with almost no tail at all. And it is so difficult to fly with no tail that it takes 7 years for them to reach the stage where they can learn to where they have learned to fly with no tail. So it gets shorter and shorter each time, and by the time they're 7, there's almost no tail at all as they fly. So he's got a little tail, and he's looking at something. I don't know what it is, but you know, on a day like this when the wind is a bit off and it's cold, birds like that don't like to fly too much because it's difficult for them in the absence of thermals, and this cold wind will blow them. Well, it doesn't blow them off course, but it makes it difficult to circle in one place. You kind of got to tack against the wind. There's just a lot more effort, unless there's something really worthwhile. A stunning young bird, that. I believe you've been having a marvelous time looking at the Nkuhuma Pride. Just before you left me last, we just spotted some tracks, and I'm pretty sure that the animals you've been watching would have turned up at the end of the tracks that we found. They were from early last night, and it seems that they have murdered something hapless during the course of the night and finished it. And yet again, it's interesting to me as we talk about the demise of animals while looking at a carrion-eating battalier. It's been interesting to me how the Nkuhuma Pride seems, in the 5 weeks that I've been here today, they don't kill large animals, or they don't often. Apparently they have killed hippo before, and some giraffe and sometimes buffalo, But since I've been here, they probably do what most lions do, which is kill something probably like an impala or a young kudu, finish it quickly in the night, and then move on. And I think that that's probably more common than we think it is. I think impala and small antelope probably make up the bulk of the diet. And then when we do see them on giraffe and buffalo or hippo, it's a much more unusual occurrence. All right, so we're just going to show you, there were some monkeys alarm calling off to where that battalier is looking, but well sort of out of range from what I can see. They're quite a long way away. I'm just going to show you a picture of the adult battalier. Then we're going to carry on towards where those monkeys were alarm calling, and then we'll see what else we can see. So there you can see the adult. There's beautiful his and hers red face mask, and the juveniles tend to be something like that, and that one there is basically what we're seeing, and you'll get variations of all of them. That's a bit older, that juvenile, you can see getting a slightly red face and an even shorter tail. That is the battalier eagle, beautiful bird. Okay, right, well I think we'll press gently along and see if we can't find what those monkeys were alarm calling at just now. And otherwise, you'll go back to the lions at some stage. I believe they are now doing what the Nkuhuma Pride seems to do best, which is go to sleep. Oh, I did want to show you something. Brian, did we lose our rope? Oh, here we go. Brian and I, while we were stopped listening to the sounds of the bush and seeing if we could pick up where the alarm calls were going and where those vultures were landing, we made some rope. Now, as I said to Brian, we're not about to go and rig a frigate for Drake's voyage or anything like that with this sort of rope, but it is pretty strong stuff, and I'll show you the bush it's made of. It's quite efficient. There we go. Plaited from the tree Gruvia flava, and this is Gruvia flava. And you can see from where we've taken the bark, and that is actually, Brian and I were not just horsing about, although we do some of that. This is actually what the tree used to be used for, and it still is in some areas. Some people, especially kids, if they're hungry, and often in these areas, you know, protein is a very scarce resource, and kiddies, when they're on holiday, they don't go off to the mall or to the cinema or things like that. They go into the bush and they try and find fun things to do, and if there's a small meal in the end of that fun, then that's what they'll do. And they'll make much more competent rope than the one that Brian and I put together. I think Brian's is that one. Mine is too much of an embarrassment for me to show you. But they make much finer twine. You can make very thin rope out of this tree. It's called a Gruvia flava, like I say. I think the velvet raisin is its common name. And then they use the twine to make little snares for birds, for francolins. And in the rural areas out here, when the cattle lands, the francolins are still around, and they set little traps, amazingly clever and intricate traps with this sort of rope. Nothing as crude as that, but with very fine rope made from this tree. And then if they're lucky enough, they catch a francolin or two, go and cook it over an open fire for lunch. And that's a good way to spend your day, probably a much healthier way than some of the kids in the Western world spend their holidays. All right, on we go. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to keep your rope and toss this out. Hello, Donna. Talking of catching birds, ground birds to eat, you apparently looked at some guinea fowl with Scott, and where you would be able to catch one with one of those ropes, not the ones that Brian and I made, but somebody that a local child had made perhaps. And you want to know, are they edible? Donna, guinea fowl are edible. Whether you would choose to eat one or not, I'm not sure. In some parts of the world, in some of the lodges I've worked, they serve guinea fowl as something of a delicacy. And to my mind, it tastes not dissimilar from a sort of, if you can think of a sisal rope soaked in apricot sauce with a bit of chicken stock and perhaps a slight gamey, entraily taste. To my mind, that is what a guinea fowl tastes like. There are many who would disagree vehemently with me and tell you that they were quite delicious. There are others who will give you the recipe, and I think I've given this recipe before, for guinea fowl, where what you do is you take a pot, big three-legged steel pot, iron pot, fill it with the veggies and things, and delicious stewing veggies and root vegetables. Then you put a brick in the pot, and you put the guinea fowl in the pot too. And you boil that up for about 2 days. And then at the end of 2 days, you take the brick and the guinea fowl out of the pot, and you throw the guinea fowl away and consume the brick with the vegetables. Hello, John boy. I knew somebody was going to come up with a sarky comment about our rope and our stuck incident yesterday. Thank you, John boy, for reminding me. For those of you who didn't see, I managed to get Jigga stuck yesterday and were pushed out by two kind ladies. Luckily it is 2015, so I didn't feel entirely emasculated by the process, just a little bit. John boy, I'm not sure that this would be powerful enough to haul out the Land Rover, especially with the amazing skill that I have of getting very stuck very hard, so probably not. And then another question about strangling plants. Dave, you want to know if there are any plants or weeds that stop plants from growing, that might cut off the circulation of other plants. Dave, the most obvious one is the fig tree. We have lots of strangler figs. The most common one here is something called Ficus stillmanii, and it will grow in dead trees, especially dead leadwoods, but it will also grow in other trees and eventually strangle them to death. In terms of creepers that sort of overwhelm trees, no, not so much. There are lots of creepers that grow up into trees, but nothing that tends to cause much strangulation. There are a couple of alien invasive plants like the triffid weed or Chromalina odorata, and that will form very thick stands that will choke out the native vegetation. Yeah, nice question. Thanks, Dave. So we're into the area where we heard the monkey's alarm calling a little earlier, but I don't see anything just yet. Hello, John in Los Angeles. Another fairly common question people have around here about the snakes. Have I ever seen a tough arrow or a black mamba or any other venomous snakes about the place? John, I've seen lots of them. And I've caught some of them too. And there's a beautiful waterbuck bull in front of us. So, John, I'll get back to your snake question now. He, like most of the things that Brian and I have tried to look at today, is taking flight. So just while we move gently up towards him, I'm just going to stop here. No, I'm not. Now, we've spoken a lot about smell. I can smell that waterbuck. Can you smell him, Brian? You've got a very musky smell, and there's some cows off to the right. It's a really lovely smell. We'll just stop here and see if they don't relax a bit with us. So, John, in California, Los Angeles, yes, plenty of snakes out here, but they're not as terrifying as you think they are. They really will move away far more often than they will do anything like take a strike at you. I've caught puff adders. They're very slow. I've caught cobras when I've had to. I'm not a snake wrangler or a herpetologist by any stretch. There's a calf being chased by a young bull. But, they're just not, the snakes are not out here to get us. It's really a waste of their venom to try and bite us. They don't bite us because they want to eat us. They bite us because we make them afraid sometimes. And so puff adders will always warn you before they strike. A cobra will always warn you before it strikes. A mamba tends to be more easily threatened, so I wouldn't try and catch one because I'm not a trained snake handler. But I know people who are well-trained snake handlers who will happily catch a mamba and do so without too much fear. Yes, you've got to be very careful, of course. But the chances of being bitten at random, actually, John, they are bitten by a snake out here. So I've never met anybody who's been struck by lightning. And I've also, likewise, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's been seriously bitten by a snake. I know a few people who were being a bit stupid when trying to catch them and have been nipped by snakes they didn't think were that venomous. Nobody's died. But it's really unlikely that you can be bitten by a snake. There was one fellow who's a good friend and he's a real character, and he on one New Year's Eve was obviously a few too many sheets to the wind, and in the reserve not far from here he found what is a stiletto snake, which is quite a nasty snake. It's got a nasty cytotoxic venom, and he mistook it for a blind snake, which of course is totally harmless. He tried to pick it up, and this thing has got little fangs. The stiletto snake has little fangs that stick out the side of its mouth, and it just nipped him on the end of his finger. And he said the pain was utterly immediate and utterly excruciating. And he knew that he'd made a mistake, so they rushed him off to hospital, where he spent 3 days convalescing. I think he was in intensive care for a while, mainly because they just didn't want to have to chop off his finger. That was the big issue when you get bitten by a snake like that, is that your flesh starts to rot almost immediately. That's what the proteins in the venom does to you, and it doesn't take very much, obviously. But he's fine. He didn't lose his finger, and while many people would like to tell the war stories of when they'd been bitten by a snake and survived, he tries to keep the story very under wraps, of course, because it was his own gormless, slightly drunken stupidity that had him bitten by the black stiletto snake circa 2012-2013 New Year's Eve. So, John in California, unless you're trying to pick up a stiletto snake after 37 beers, you'll be okay. Hello, Elizabeth in Minneapolis. First time I've had this question out here, and it's a good one. Why do lions avoid waterbuck because of that musky smell? Elizabeth, no, I don't believe they do. They will eat, I've seen them eating waterbuck. I've also seen them eating the most foul, rancid, disgusting, rotting buffalo and giraffe meat that's been sat in the sun festering for a week. So they don't worry too much about it. Maybe if given the choice between that and something else, they might not go for it. But I suspect that the smell's function is more a following thing, and possibly also a territorial thing. Humans, though, if you want to eat waterbuck, you have to skin them very carefully because they can taint the meat quite badly. That's lovely. They're all disappearing off Djuma to another reserve, which is a bit sad. Anyway. Hello, Gilly in Wisconsin. Gilly, you have read the book that I wrote. Thank you for doing that. It's called A Year in the Wild. For those of you who haven't read it, I'll go and buy it immediately on Amazon. I think the British site, CO UK. Gilly, for those of you who don't know, it's a light and fun book about two brothers who go and work at a 5-star lodge in and around this general vicinity, and it's about the sort of behind the scenes things that go on at those lodges. Gilly, I am much more like the more sarcastic brother Angus. That's sort of me at my most dark, I suppose. And there's a lovely account of, well, I think it's quite a lovely account of a dog in the book called Trubshaw. And Trubshaw allowed me to use his real name. He sadly died last year. He was a magnificent Staffordshire Bull Terrier with the brain of a stone and the heart of gold. Magnificent animal. Sadly passed on into retirement in the Eastern Cape, is where he lived out his years. Thank you, Gilly, for that little marketing push. Marianne, you've made an interesting comment that apparently there's something called a kudzu vine in the US that strangles trees. And I thought there was something like that over there. We definitely don't get it here. There are no vines that strangle trees here. And then a question about our guinea fowl and what we do. And I think I've probably said enough now. Look at the little baby climbing up. That's that baby that we see quite often with the sort of funny shape, funny skin, and that's her mother. We've spent quite a lot of time with her mother before and the baby. And she's lactating very heavily. And she's just very wary of us today. Now, I have been around her. I've been around her when she's been completely chilled with us. And she's quite wary at the moment. There she goes. So thanks, everybody. It's been a wonderful morning. Strange weather that we're having, but we will see you in the afternoon. Please join us. Please tell all your friends to join us, and we'll see you later on this blustery winter's day. Thanks a lot.